What is up, guys? You got NotTheWorst here, bringing another Black Desert online video, and today we're taking a look at what we'll call Phase 2 of the Dark Knight reworks. If you didn't catch the Phase 1 video covering the first iterations of it, I do have a link to that in the description if you want to check that one out first, so that you'll kind of get what has changed. There's actually been a few updates since then, and waited until we had like enough to kind of make sense to go over them over again anyways. So we'll go ahead and jump in first. As far as pre-awakening goes, what you may have seen that occurred between the first video and this one is they actually took the forward guard off of slanted balance in both prime and regular. And in the regular setup, that was added back, so it does have forward guard. Again, obviously, kind of a weird change for DK in general, because that's kind of a staple. They did add the range of the CC, not quite the full extent of how the damage hits in succession, but there was a little bit of range on that as well for slanted balance. At the time this is being done now, that's still the case. It is slightly ranged, not like it was when it first came out, but I fully expect that to be removed before this does hit live servers. And in all likelihood, you're going to see a quick patch where it may not even be mentioned, but it'll get removed because they just don't want that skill to have the range on it for the CC and the frontal guard. Now that frontal guard's back, obviously makes sense that they'll take the range away. So aside from that, for main skills, Corrupt Ground has been adjusted again. They're trying to just make sure they make this a skill. It's quick enough that you could potentially finish a combo or something, since it has a 22% accuracy modifier on it, and the damage is becoming pretty good now. Obviously doesn't hit quite as hard as a Lunacy of Vidir. However, Lunacy of Vidir is only a 5% modifier, so if you're trying to finish a combo on a high evasion target or something like that, it's definitely feasible to at least use to clean up the combo there. As far as PvE, using it as a tier 3 add-on when you're setting up, it's, I guess, fast enough that you could potentially just use it as a setup skill to pull mob while you're pulling mobs, rather. Unfortunately, on a 30-second cooldown, I think when it's maxed out, it's still 20 seconds. I probably only have 1 point in it, but even when it's down to max, it's a 20-second cooldown. Obviously, you're clearing packs much faster than 20 seconds, so not going to be any use for you there. From there, let's go ahead and move on into the Awakening set and go through what we had coming up for this week. So we have, first of all, Dusk has been added so that you use that in Awakening, and the skill itself has just been removed from the Awakening kit. Hallucination Gap's just not a thing anymore, so you know, that is what it is. Then the flow for the bombardment skill is supposed to be more natural. I'll be honest with you, I don't really notice any difference either way for it there. The linkage is supposed to be a little quicker too. It probably is, but not anything to where you're not noticing unless you're maybe side by side. Nothing to write home about there. Now, something that there is to write home about, and overall we haven't seen any super amazing things. I think this is maybe not quite getting enough attention that it deserves. There's a new skill that was adding to the Awakening kit, and it's a third flow to the Shattering Darkness chain. So it kind of makes sense why they decided to take Frontal Guard away from Bombardment in previous iterations here. So you have your Shattering with Frontal Guard, Bombardment, and then we're going to, just for the purpose of this video and my lack of Korean speaking, we're going to call this Shooting Star because it looks like a shooting star in the thing. So go with me on that. This, although you'll see when I use it, the actual icon isn't coming up. You won't see the Frontal Guard icon here pop up when I use it, but this is a Frontal Guard float, and it's a third skill, so that you do have to use Bombardment in it in order to get to it. But watch how quick this is, right? Okay, so, and keep in mind, that's a Frontal Guard there. Now, I can't tell how long it lingers, if it lingers on the end of it, because we don't have the icon on there. You could test this by having someone CC you directly after it, but it's a pretty quick pickup, and you could potentially, realistically, use your right mouse button on the Bombardment skill to maybe pick up a pretty quick float here. If you go backwards to it and then LMB, you may be able to pick up a CC fairly easily with that, just because of how fast it is. You're just like slightly slower than a teleport would be to get behind your opponent there. So actually a pretty handy skill, and it explains a little bit more why the Frontal Guard is removed from Bombardment. Not that anyone's happy about it. It just makes a little bit more sense, so that there's at least some risk into doing that. If this was just all protected throughout, I imagine you just straight up are not going to get that third skill as a forward guard float. It's just not going to happen in the Awakening kit without that. So some amount of risk. I'm a little happier with that. Obviously, just being protected all the time must be nice, but hey, it's DK. We don't get these types of things. And then lastly, between the first video now, they did add super armor to the Cluster of Despair skill. So you have that added on it as well, and they increased the Phantom Sword damage on it. It was like 1173 before, and it's 1323 now, but the same number of hits. So they're bumping it up a bit. to be a little more useful. At least as super armor, so you can do something with this in PvP and not just lock the skill entirely so that you don't get dead. The damage is actually not bad. It does still hurt a little bit. Then you've lost your spammable tier 3 add-on though, like the old cluster did, but not a terrible skill for it. In my opinion, if they just actually took Touch of Exploitation, deleted it, and made that the new Cluster of Despair for it, and then just made Cluster of Despair the old one, you kind of get both the best of both worlds there, because let's be honest, this is still doing nothing. You're not using this. I mean, you're really not. I've heard arguments that like, oh, in PvE, you're like, it doesn't make any sense to use in PvE. You can literally just on cooldown spam your Spirit Legacy, and you're better off in PvE than sitting here using this thing. So whatever, delete this skill, put the new cluster on it. I'd be happy with that, and give us old cluster as well. But it's not bad. It's not bad. But anyways, that wraps up for Awakening. Saying it's not bad is because we're about to see some really good stuff in the Succession. So let me get my skill setup swapped over to Succession build, and we'll take a look at what we got going on for that kit. All right, so we are now spec'd into Succession, and get ready for some spice, because Succession is starting to look very, very strong here. So we already saw in the previous iterations the Smoky Haze interaction with Comma Slash and Dusk being a little cleaner with the Comma Slash speed up of the animation. They've now actually sped up the Dusk linkage of the Comma Slash in the first place, so it's even faster than it was to start with, which obviously just a good thing. Then we have old reliable Lunacy of Vidir, which keep in mind now has a hotkey Shift R and B as well, which is just nice in its own right. But if you noticed, when we used that there, we didn't have a 12-second cooldown. This was reduced to 9 seconds, which no one's complaining about shorter cooldowns by any means. Love that I don't have the fat roll locked for evasion there. So definitely a really nice thing there. And then we have Spirit Legacy was reduced as well, 11 seconds down to 8 seconds on this. Just interesting to note, if you take a look at the Prime one reduced to 8 seconds, and then you go over to max level Legacy in Awakening, they actually haven't adjusted this. So as it stands, the Succession class that pulls 2 Awakening skills over to the Succession kit, one of them being Spirit Legacy, a like staple Awakening skill, is actually lower cooldown with the same damage. With higher damage. It's a little silly as it stands. Obviously, this was just an oversight. I fully expect the Awakening version to be the same as the Succession version, if not even making the Awakening slightly stronger, as it used to be in the past. But as it stands now, it's actually just flat out better in in Succession than it is Awakening, despite being an actual Awakening skill. They did adjust PvP damage as far as the tooltip on it. They're just saying that it matches what reality was, and this you will see that is different for Succession and Awakening here. You've got a 35.4%, and the max level one here, I think it's like 32 or 34. Yeah, 32.7% on that. So the PvP dam reduction is slightly higher on the Succession version for that, so keep that in mind there. However, when you've got a lower cooldown, doesn't really matter much. We've got some improved linkage speed to termination, or the flow termination, so that second skill, definitely noticeable for sure. If you're used to just finishing out combos, and doing your thing from there, you can really see that second hit landing a lot faster. You can get into your Twilight, or maybe you like to Legacy before your Twilight, however you like to do it, or maybe you're getting fancy nowadays because you got your evasion guy and you need to corrupt ground and stunt on him with a terrible skill that just has high accuracy, whatever the case may be. But very noticeable improvement there in skill linkage between the two. Obviously not lightning fast. We don't expect it to be as a Succession DK, but faster is always better. We also got the number of hits on the enforcement itself, not the flow. That was increased. It used to be 4 hits on that hit. It's actually going to hit 6 times now at the high level Prime enforcement version. So it's just going to hit even harder, aside from it just being faster. More damage Succession DK. Hey man, I'll take it, but it's a little interesting why they just keep pumping out all these damage things. Now, they also have activation speed for the second hit of Ravadrake, and they've been tweaking this throughout the reworks, make Ravadrake useful again, outside of cleaning up combos and that sort of thing again. Definitely noticeable on the second one for sure. The fourth being the absolute flow, maybe not entirely necessary. Easy skill to use if you're for some reason behind on cooldowns in PvE. You shouldn't be, and then of course it does have its application in combo, especially extended combos for where you want to do it. So again, faster is better here. And then kind of the bigger thing, I know people had on their wish list, they want DK in some sort to get a grab. Grip of Grudge is a popular one to talk about a grab just because of how the actual animation looks. and things like that. And while I don't think you'll ever see that with DK, what Succession did get that Awakening has and does not have, or at least doesn't have yet if they're going to get it, is Airstrike now has a guard gauge reduction effect added to it. So if you're familiar with Corsairs eating your guard up when you're frontal guard for it, and that effect also doesn't allow you to recover any forward guard for 5 seconds too. Airstrike has that now in Succession. So if we take some of the phase 1 changes to it, the flow to it had super armor added also, which was not initially in the phase 1 changes. So it's pretty usable here. Someone guarding with the speed up of the animation of that airstrike, this can actually be like really useful landing that hits. Obviously you have a little bit of protection that's not going to apply when you're putting those hits on, but it's not going to be an easy thing for your opponent to catch that in time, and you have a pretty safe super armor to follow up with afterwards with the new flow. And of course, hey man, we're Succession, so you can always dusk out of anything you want, right? You're not locked into that by any means. So not too bad for that. Now, as far as the next portion, so we've covered Succession, very excited about that. I want to cover one more thing, and then I'll kind of give my thoughts on where we're headed with this at the end of the video. The last thing we're going to talk about is the passives for it. So we saw all of the classes had a revamped passive. They said they were going to do this, and they did, and every single class has changed their passive skills in some way or another. I can tell you across the board, outside of Lawn and Archer, every class that had accuracy in it had some accuracy reduced or removed entirely. Cough, cough, hash lost 10% accuracy passive. DK did as well. So what is going to happen with the passives now is that first of all, you max your class passives at level 60, and then everybody at level 63 has a plus 2% special attack boost, right? So that's Sage's level 63 on live servers now. Everybody is getting that level 63, and all of your other ones were pushed to be earlier. So at level 60, you have max passives for what your class is. Now, what did DK get? And what did they lose? Well, the passives are now all accuracy plus 5% and critical hit damage increase plus 10%. Comparison to what that was before is it was actually a total of all accuracy plus 12%. So we lost 7% in accuracy passive there, and magic AP plus 10, just a flat magic AP. As far as how that's going to impact the critical damage, 10% increase obviously is good. How does that impact versus magic AP? I wouldn't be surprised if there was an actual calculation done out on these and they were fairly similar. I would say the edge is probably to the critical hit damage, but not entirely positive off of that. If we look at what the 3% increase, 2 ring increase in damage was bringing, on the cups that you add to your rings to get an additional 6% critical hit damage if you run 2 of them. The damage increase off those, if we scale that to 10 for it, we're looking at roughly about 5% increased damage for what you'd normally see. It's a little hard to have that calculation, but something else to keep in mind is this is likely going to be slightly more useful than the magic AP plus 10 against gauntlet classes, so there's kind of an upside there. But overall, worst case scenario, you're probably the same damage in some scenarios, and best case scenario, it's going to be slightly more. What we do want to take into account is it's not just that we're getting that 10% critical damage increase, everybody's also getting 2% special attack damage. So I wouldn't necessarily think of it as 10 magic AP versus 10% critical hit damage. Think of it as 10 magic AP versus 10% critical hit damage and 2 special attack damage, which in that scenario, that 10% and 2% bonus on those is certainly better than magic AP in pretty much every single scenario you can come up with, outside of not landing a special attack, right? They might be comparable there. The accuracy loss is not good. Obviously, nobody's going to be happy about this. DK being an accuracy class in general, being able to deal with evasion classes. It's not the end of the world. It really isn't. Other classes deal with not having accuracy and get by just fine using accuracy accessories. You may have to change up your gear, your crystal setup. Maybe you can't run full human damage at Bloody Monastery anymore and still hit a 100% hit rate. Maybe you can with Trap of a Deer. Actually, you won't. You'll miss some skills from hitting 100%. You'll be slightly short there. So maybe you have to make some adjustments to adjust for that. I wouldn't entirely cry over this because everybody has lost accuracy except for Lawn and Archer for the most part. It's not so much a detriment specifically to DK that they were coming after. This is more of an overall buff to evasion is what's likely happening here. Now, how does this scale with other classes getting new skills that boost their accuracy or lower opponent evasion? Definitely something to consider there, especially because DK doesn't have either of those things in the Succession kit, and Awakening has Trap of Adir to lower your opponent evasion quite a bit if you can manage to land it while you're fighting someone. So something else to think about, something I would hope that they start to look out for in the next couple of weeks, but we'll have to see. So I'm really, really excited for Succession build. It looks absolutely amazing. Awakening it's not that it's bad. Awakening on live servers now is fine, but with these new buffs coming out to all these other classes and the way Succession's looking to shaping up, it's not looking great for Awakening. I was pretty hopeful before that they were going to bring some more into the kit, so we'd see some pretty nice stuff start to get in there, and that maybe they just hadn't really spent time on the Awakening kit very much, so they would do that shortly. However, it's going to actually hit live servers December 15th on the KR side, and then for the rest of the servers, it's going to hit live servers on December 22nd. So we're looking at less than a month worth of tweaks. I don't imagine there's going to be a whole lot extra added. So although I was extremely hopeful there will be more soon, I think we're looking at Succession just outweighing Awakening by a good bit, unless we do happen in the next week or two to see something huge hit. So there you have it for phase 2 of the DK reworks. Hopefully we do have more come out so that I can do a phase 3 for it, and then I'll be talking about how dope Awakening's looking after the fact, but at this time not really sure, but stay tuned for that one. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to like it. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you get notifications when new videos do go live. And if you'd like to catch me playing live, there's a link to my Twitch page in the description down below. You can jump on over there, drop a follow so you get notifications for that as well. With that said, that's going to be it for this one. I want to thank everybody for watching, and I will see you next time.